Astrology 101 Week 2 12 Houses of the Zodiac. Created, written, directed, and produced by Reverend Dr. Dikki Mullen. In this video, Dr. Mullen will discuss characteristics of the ascendant, succedent, cadent, and angular elements of the natal chart. In addition, she will discuss the 12 houses of the zodiac and their association with the various planets that may fall within them at the time of birth.
We're talking, just to review a bit, your angular houses, which I have here in bold type, are the most significant ones. First house is the ascendant rising sign, the degree of the first house, and the overall is your appearance and identity. Fourth house is the family, the Enum Chali, bottom of the sky. And the seventh house is another very important point. It's called the Descendant, but it's also your partnership house. This is marriage, legal and other partnerships, justice, interaction with the general public, open and above board, good or bad, relationships and interactions with others are your seventh house. And then finally, there is the 10th house, the MC, medium Chali, or mid-heaven, and that's the high noon point. And the first and the 10th houses are the most important of the angular ones. Fame, achievement, leadership, and visibility all go with the 10th house. Am I going to be famous? That's another popular question people will ask. And you can see by looking at the 10th house and the sign ruling it, and where the planet is that rules that sign, how someone will be famous or infamous, or whether they'll be well known. In ancient times, astrologers always recorded all the royal births at high noon. That was when the sun would be overhead in the 10th house. And many times the presidential candidate that wins will have a strong 10th house if you want to get into political astrology, but we won't talk about that here because I'll lose half of you right away. You're divided down the middle between liberals and conservatives. The 10th house is visibility, leadership, fame and fortune, very, very powerful house. Next, we want to go to look at the succedent houses. The succedent houses represent basic background. They have a link with the immediate past, their foundations. And you sometimes get everything that's promised in the birth chart in the succedent houses, depending on the strength of the planets. The succedent houses, the second house is money, possessions, tools, and earning ability, how you feel about material possessions. The second house is about earnings, not money that you might win or inherit, whatever. The second house is what you go down and apply for a job for, or create a business and earn yourself, things you want, tangible things. The second house is very popular and powerful. The next of the succedent houses is the fifth house, children, hobbies, creative ability, romance. Nothing to do with marriage. We all know marriage and romance are totally different. But the fifth house is love affairs, things you enjoy, your vacation break, whether you're going to be able to afford a cruise or whatever you want to do on vacation. Many people in this area have a strong fifth house because it relates to the entertainment industry. So a lot of people who come to me who have jobs at Disney or Universal, or who work in other branches of hobbies and games like the sports world, will have a loaded fifth house, and that's where you can look to see how well they will be doing. And I always, of course, go on and on about never dating online. All the really bad readings I do about love, they've all met them online, men and women both. So after I tell people that, and they want to know if there's romance in their future, well, how they can find someone, where they can meet someone, who is someone that would be nice and fun to be with, you look at the fifth house of the chart to see that. The next of the succeedent houses, the eighth house, has to do with invested money that might be inherited or come through an accident settlement. You know, if you listen to those, all the lawyers on TV that are always saying they can get you millions of dollars if you call them during an accident or after an accident, whatever. If you're going to win the lottery or win that type of thing, the eighth house has to be really strong. Mysteries of all types, death, rebirth, and passion. The eighth house will show the manner of death. The fourth house will be your circumstances at the end of death. The fourth house relates to the endings of things. So never predict death. It harms people. That's a very common question. They think they want to know, but it's very injurious. However, if you want to look and see, that's where you would look in the chart. The eighth house is a lot to do with secrets and passions in general. And then the final succeedent house is the 11th house. The 11th house is your circle of friends and acquaintances. This isn't love and romance, but it's friendship, goals, wishes, hopes, and politics. And any clubs and groups you belong to, or if you belong to the Lions Club or other junior league or different social services groups like that, the 11th house is very descriptive of those. And again, the succeedent houses will go with the foundation or background of things, and you sometimes get you'll often get some of what they promise. Last of all, we're in the Keaton houses. The Keaton houses are the future. It's uncertain whether you'll get everything they promise. They're subtle, and it depends on the strength of the chart, how much work and emphasis is placed on them. Often the Keaton houses are not totally fulfilled. The third house is the first of the Keaton houses. It relates to your elementary school experiences. Those are a nightmare, aren't they? I don't want to think about that. Siblings, brothers and sisters, neighbors, and the ability to communicate. So, and also local travel, like whether you ride your bicycle, the bus, or have a car, and routes you might take for traveling. Okay, the next Keaton house is the sixth house. The sixth house is where Sue's little dogs, the fearsome 5 or 4, and where Templeton lived, small animals and pets. They're important. Your daily routine, what time you usually get up, you know, whether you have time for breakfast or rushing out the door, your service and employment. Now, it's not fame and fortune, but it's more like daily labors and work. The sixth house is also health. Health conditions are another popular topic. The first house, which is the physical body, and the sixth house have a lot to do with health. And unless you're a nurse, several of you here are, I know, let me see, Sue and Lee, I know are for sure, and maybe others. If you are, then you can do health readings. If you aren't, do a disclaimer and say this is just my idea, because it's one way you can get into a lot of trouble doing readings. You know, it's just something to say if it's not, you're not trained in health, but that's something people are going to ask about, or you yourself might wonder about. So you look at the sixth house for health. And then there's the ninth house. The ninth house is higher education, in-laws, Are your in-laws outlaws? Ninth house will show you that. I don't know. I saw a joke with that on it. And then also grandparent-grandchild relationships will be described by the ninth house. Philosophy and religion, long distance travel, not going from here to Cocoa to watch a launch, but if you want to go to England or somewhere nice, the ninth house will describe a long journey. And that's Keaton. The last house is the 12th house. There are a whole series of books on each of the houses individually, but particularly the 12th house. The 12th house is the hardest house for most people to understand. It's sacrifice, solitude, secrets, institutions. My friend Gloria Penrod, who's been in spirit a long time, some of you might remember her name, Lee might, was a longtime leader in the astrology world, and she decided to go down to the jail and offer an astrology class. I wouldn't be brave enough to do that, but she found that all of the prisoners had the sun in the 12th house, or nearly all of them did. So if there's anyone you're really worried about getting into deep trouble, and also people who spend their lives in institutions might have a strong 12th house. The 12th house is also mental imprisonment, the prisons we put ourselves in through our minds. We can all be our own worst enemies, and also secrets of secret enemies. Wild animals and wilderness areas are all the 12th house. Interestingly enough, many presidents have a strong 12th house. Abraham Lincoln did, and so does good King Joe Biden. And if you look at the horoscopes of other presidents, the 10th and the 12th houses are usually very prominent and might have the sun there. The 12th house is also past lives, your next lives, reincarnation, and people who are kidnapped by aliens. Now, I haven't had that happen to me, thank goodness, that I know of, but enough people that I really respect and think a lot of claim they have been. And I don't know, it's not good to dismiss anything too quickly, because many things we once thought were crazy are happening every day. I was watching some videos about prophecy, and there was one 50 years ago that Bishop Fulton Sheen recorded that predicted everything that's going on right now. It just chilled me. You can find it on YouTube if you want to. Bishop Sheen was very popular in the 1970s and a little earlier. He's been gone a long time. And this just came up by accident, and it just was chilling. And making that germane to what we're talking about right now, the 12th house is where you're going in your next lifetime. The distant and unrevealed future, where will we be in the year 2525? The 12th house may show whether you'll be incarnated again or not, or where were you several generations back. If you do ancestry, many people are looking at an astrological family tree and feeling that they're reincarnated in the same families over and over again. If you really look at that, that is also a really interesting thing to look at. Moving along a little bit further with the houses, I want to tell where the sun will be at each time of day. Now, you need a table of houses, or you have to have the chart done to know where the moon, Mars, and the other planets are. But the sun is very obvious, whether it's rising or setting, right? And for those of you that will be learning to do your own chart setup, if you want to take certification with one of the astrology groups, whatever, you will have to learn to hand calculate a chart. You can tell in an instant whether you're right or not by looking to see what house is in, the sun is in. And the sun is the circle with the dot in it. We'll be going over the calligraphy for that next week and the symbols. But if you're looking at your chart, just find the circle with the dot in the middle. That shows where you shine. That's the most important single point in your chart. So let's go through the approximate time of day. This can vary according to the time of year. We know now that there are more hours of daylight than there were at the winter solstice, right? And also, if we were up in, why am I talking about Iceland? We'll switch over to Finland. Why, if you were up in Finland, of course, you know that it would be darker for longer, lighter for longer. So this is approximate. The first house is the 2 hours before sunrise. People that are born between 5 and 7 in the morning, approximately, will have a first house sun. So if you know you were born at 3 in the afternoon, you're hand calculating your own chart, and it turns out with the sun in the first house, redo your addition because you just did it wrong. And also, if you should happen, the computer programs now are very accurate. The early ones were not. But if you're doing a chart and you know you were born, say, at 6:30 in the morning, you should have a first house sun, and it turns up in the 9th house, you'll know there's a problem. So that's really good to know. The second house is going to be when a little bit earlier before sunrise, 3 to about 5 in the morning, the sun will be in the second house. The third house will be from 1 to about 3 in the morning. Remember, there's 24 hours in a day, and the sun stays in each house approximately 2 hours. That can vary a little, but this gives you a ballpark figure. The fourth house is midnight. And from right around midnight, say midnight to 11 p.m. the night before, you'll have a strong fourth house. And then you want to go to the fifth house. It's going to be 2 hours earlier, right around 10 or so in the evening. If they're born around 9, 10 in the evening, you're going to have a strong fifth house. The sixth house is going to be right after sunset. So that's going to be, around 8 or so in the evening, 7, 8 in the evening, the strong sixth house. The seventh house, the descendant, is when the sun sets, okay? Ascendant is sunrise. The descendant is sunset. Someone's born around sunset to 2 hours after that, there will be a strong seventh house. That's approximately 7 to 5, 7 p.m. to 5 p.m. The eighth house is late afternoon, 3 o'clock or so to about 5. Roughly, you'll have a strong eighth house. Around 1 to 2 in the afternoon, you'll have a strong ninth house. And then noon to maybe 1 or so, 11:30 to 1:30, depending on the time, high noon, that's the 10th house. That's where the royal births were recorded. And then you will be in the 11th house next, and that's going to be around 10, 11 in the morning, 9:30 maybe, depending on the time of year. And then finally, we're in the 12th house. The 12th house is the time that's right after sunrise. Abraham Lincoln was born right after sunrise. His biography says that, and that's how it was calculated that he was born with his sun in the 12th house. And so that would be, about 7:30 to maybe 8:30 or 9 in the morning. And so sort of be aware of the general time. People with an angular house sun will live in the present. Succeedant, they're building on foundations of the past. Cadent can be out of touch with the step of the world. And again, the whole chart is that, but it can be futuristic or sort of lost in space. On that cheerful note, let's move to another slide. Oh, there it is. All right. This is the first horoscope that I showed you, and this is the horoscope of our class. I just couldn't decide on a celebrity chart. I was sure whoever I picked, it would upset someone and that would ruin the evening for them. So I thought we'll do an event chart. Everything has a birth. If you buy a new car, like Marianne did, congratulations on your new car, Marianne, that has a horoscope. If you move into a new house, it has a birth chart. Our class has a horoscope. And here it is. Let's take a look at it. This was for 8 o'clock on April 12th, and that was right after sunset. You see that circle with the dot in it on my pointer, everybody? That shows the sun setting. So we know that I did the chart right because it was at sunset when we had it. Now, when you first look at a chart, the first one you try to interpret can be overwhelming. So begin with this. Do you see these darker lines right here? They represent the angles. This is the first house, the ascendant, that's the seventh. If more placements in a chart are above the horizon, the person tends to be an extrovert, very visible, very out there. They're not hiding a whole lot, probably, unless the 12th house contradicts it. But look to see at your own chart or whatever chart you're using, whether there are more planets above the horizon or below. And this is almost 50-50, but it's a little bit more below. Below, the person is an introvert. You don't know much about them, or as much as you think you might. There can be some secrets in the past, a hidden divorce, or whatever they're trying to hide. And so planets below the horizon tend to be more subtle, just like when the sun sets and is moving in this part of the sky, you don't see it until it comes up again. And that's the same idea. If it's half and half, this is leaning more toward the introvert, the sample chart, but it's almost 50-50. Then it's sort of balanced. They're half out front and half more reserved. The next thing you want to look at is the two sides of the chart. People who are in control of their lives will have almost everything on this side of the chart. And of course, this is symbolic because it's an event. But if this were a baby's chart, it doesn't mean that the person isn't successful, but it means that circumstances kind of lead them along and mold their lives. They have a little less free will than others. For those that have more placements over here on the right-hand side, this is called the West. And by the way, the directions, you noticed I was going counterclockwise, east and west. They're opposite of a normal map that you'd use to navigate out on the street if your GPS is broken, whatever is going on. But more placements on the right side, they're pulled along by circumstances. I was looking at Prince Philip's birth chart. Does anyone want to guess whether he was in control or out of control of his life?
Out.
You're quite right. He was set up to meet Princess Elizabeth when he was a teenager, and she was, by people that were trying to match them up. And then, of course, even though he was prominent, did a lot of things, his life was really dedicated to his country, the military. And if you read his biography, you can see he's a perfect example of someone who is out of control of his life. He just had to flow along with destiny. By the way, the charts of the members of the royal family are all this way. Prince Charles and the Queen, they all have everything over on the right-hand side. So did President Nixon. Don't feel bad if you look at a chart for someone in your family or your own and feel you're out of control. You just have to go with the flow, look to see what seems meant to be, and don't swim against the synchronicities. If you have lots and lots of placements over here, you can call your own shots, good or bad. You're responsible for what happens in your life, a little bit more free will. But fated or free will, those are just very important things to look at. The next thing you want to do when you're looking at a chart is to see which house has the most placements in it. Now, don't feel bad if you see some houses are empty, because there are more planetary bodies. We'll be going into those next week than there are houses. And if you do professional readings and bring out a copy of the chart and set it on the table, someone will say, why don't I have anything in that one? You didn't do the whole chart. Then you have to explain a little bit that that's the way it is and jump into the reading. Michelle's smiling because she's done charts for people. And it's a very sensitive thing because that's your life. And even people who haven't really studied astrology, it can be very emotional when they first see the chart. I love it. It's a very enjoyable moment if you handle it the right way and have a nice client in front of you. But it's interesting. But you do want to look to see if there is a loaded ninth house. The person might be involved in religion, travel, the world of education. A loaded second house, they're all into money, nothing wrong with that. We all need X amount to survive, and into earning money and job skills. A strong fourth house, it's all about family. By the way, the 10th house is the more dominant parent and the same sex parent, depending, but the 4th and the 10th houses depends on the writer and the tradition, but those are descriptive of parents, which is a very important question. The house that holds the sun shows where you shine. So if we were looking at the horoscope of a person here, the 6th house sun might show a healthcare worker, someone who does animal abuse, not abuse, but animal rescue, rescuing abused animals was what I wanted to say. Someone who's very detail oriented, very into work or routine, or a healthcare worker might have a strong 6th house. Someone who is very strong with the 12th house might work within a hospital, or might care for those who are in an institution of some type, or work alone behind the scenes in solitude. A lot of people who work at home, even despite the COVID, even before the COVID crisis, would have a strong 12th house. So get a feeling for the meanings of the houses. Everyone, I have 2 videos about the houses that I'm going to post the link for on Facebook, or you can see them by going to my YouTube channel and just look up the houses of the Zodiac, because there's great detail and a lot more about each of them. But this at least is designed to give you an overview of what to expect and how to begin to look at the chart. This is the North Moon node, everybody. Do you see where I'm moving with the little arrow in the 8th house? It looks like a horseshoe. The North Moon node is not a cosmic body. It's a point in space. It's the intersection between the moon's orbit and the plane of the ecliptic, or the Earth's orbit. And the north node of the moon is a strong point to work toward. The south node isn't shown on most computer programs. I do put it in my hand-drawn charts usually. It's always right across from the north node. The north node here is in Gemini, so the south node would be in Sagittarius, right? You should now learn which sign is across from each of the other signs, because that's going to be really important as we move along. Gemini opposes Sagittarius. Cancer opposes Capricorn, and so forth. The south node here would be at 11 degrees of Sagittarius. If you ever see a chart that has everything between the nodes, this one almost does, except for Mars up here, that's a trapped chart. It doesn't occur very often, but if you're dealing with that, the person is stuck or trapped. It might be because of a mental or health condition. It might be because of previous circumstances, things that happened, but be very careful in how you interpret it. Try to figure out where the trapped area has come in. With progressions, which is beyond the scope of what we'll be doing in this class, planets can progress out of the trapped condition, but you just want to be aware of that if you ever see it when you're analyzing it. Also be aware of intercepted houses. I have a free article on my website, SkyMade and Musings. Put interceptions in the little search bar. I also have a long video up on YouTube. Interceptions are when there are two houses ruled by the same sign, and then another sign is stuck out but is a visitor. For example, here is 0 Libra. You all know that the houses are of a different sort of a size than the signs. The signs are 30 degrees. The totality of the wheel is 360 degrees, but the houses are oddly shaped. They're not the same size. And 0 Virgo is here. If this had happened to be 29 Virgo, then we would have Libra stuck before the next house occurred, and that could be an interception. If this was Scorpio, which it could be. I hope it's making some sense, but sometimes you'll see a chart that has two different signs ruled by this, two different houses ruled by the same sign, and then the same will be opposite. Rarely, if you're doing a chart for the polar latitudes, and this works because their lives are so focused up there, you'll see you'll see 4 or more interceptions. And the first time you see that, I think I'll put an example of that up for next week, just for you to see it. It can really throw you off, and it doesn't mean the chart is inaccurate. If you're right on the equator, like a chart for Ecuador, that'll almost never happen. It does for some places in the United States. We're pretty far south here in Orlando. We're only at 28 north latitude. But if you're doing charts for Massachusetts, a couple of you are from Massachusetts. If you're doing charts for Canada, we have one person from Canada here, you'll find that occurs more often. So you just kind of do want to be aware of that. Well, I want to talk about the elements a little bit here, and also the, let me see what I want to go to next. I'm kind of hesitating a little bit. Well, I will mention that the sun's movement. Let's stop share and look at everybody here. I kind of like looking at everyone's face, the whole totality of all of you. The shadows on the side of the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan in Egypt are a really nice study in astrology before things got so dangerous. And why did I say Egypt? I meant to say Chichen Itza down in the Yucatan of Mexico. And before things got so dangerous there, I took a plane over and landed near Chichen Itza and took the local buses out to see the Chichen Itzan pyramid. And if I keep my mouth shut, I can pass for being Latin. If I don't say too much, if I start talking, though, they know immediately I'm a gringo. I've been told that many times. But anyway, I was riding along, had a great time taking the local buses from the mainland, or the main place where the airplanes land and come in out to. It's almost an all-day ride, and you only can stay a couple hours before you have to take the bus back and get back at 10 at night. But it was very interesting to see how the ancient Mayans, who had their own system of astrology, really looked to see where the sun was moving, because you could see as the sun was setting how the great snake Kukulkan, one of their great gods, crawled down the side of the Great Pyramid at Chichen Itza in triangles of light and shadow. Just mentioning that because it's a kind of a significant thing that they went to that much trouble to honor that. And the same thing with Stonehenge, when sunrises occur in the other great stone circles. I want to talk about a little more about how the houses and the signs interact and about the elements. The houses and the signs are ruled by separate elements, and you can have a strong first house. The first house is the natural home of Aries. Aries is a fire sign, and the fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And we'll be talking more about that. The first house is also a fire house. In the chart of our class, Libra is on the ascendant in the first house. That's a fire house, but it isn't a fire sign. The fire houses are dynamic. If someone is very fiery and dynamic and has no fire in the birth chart at all, no Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, that will fulfill that lack. You always want to look to see if there is a lack in the chart, and either the person compensates or undercompensates for that. The second house is an earth house. It's the natural home of Taurus, which is an earth sign. But if someone were to have Gemini rising, then they would have Cancer on the second house. That would still be an earth house, but it isn't an earth sign. Does everybody get that? Nod if you do. Okay. If you don't, shake your head. Oh, you're smarter than I thought you were. Everybody's nodding. I think you're pretty smart. Really, I'm just not a good joke that. Okay. If there is an abundance of planets in an earth house and nothing in an earth sign, then the person still compensates for the earth qualities. For example, I don't like to talk about myself, but I will just a little. I have no planets in earth at all. Have you guessed that? None at all. But I do happen to have 3 in one of the earth houses. So that keeps the light on, keeps me going, whatever. So don't panic if you're reading a basic astrology book and you find you have no water in your chart or no air, because it can be written in a way to make it look really horrible. Instead, suppose you have no water, no Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio in the chart. Having no water, you'll get a terrible opinion of yourself. The person has no empathy, no psychic ability, is mean, shallow, goes on and on and on and on. And you can think that isn't me, or that isn't my granddaughter, or whoever. Look at the chart and see if there isn't a strong element in water houses. The water houses are 4, 8, and 12. And those are the water signs: Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. If you have a chart with no air, all of the books will say the person is stupid. You know, they can't get out of grade school, that they have no ideas or thoughts, they can't communicate. It looks really, really bad. Look to see if there isn't an emphasis on the air houses. The air houses are going to be the natural homes of Gemini and Libra and Aquarius. And that's 3, and that's going to be 7 and 11. And then look to emphasize when you're reading your own chart or working to help or counsel someone how to use the planets in the air houses in order to rescue themselves. So air, fire, earth, and water. No fire, there's no get up and go, no vitality, no personality. It sounds awful. So you have to make sure there's something going on in the fire houses. And of course, your fire houses are going to be Aries, the first house, Leo, the 5th house. And then you have to look at the final fire sign, which is Sagittarius, the 9th house. I did remember it. I was just seeing if you were listening. Anyway, look to see if also the qualities, the cardinal, fixed, and mutable qualities. That's another division, and I will give you a handout about this or put one out on the website for you later on. The qualities are very important because they elaborate on the categories, and they're going to matter when we get into the aspects between the planets. The aspects are the angular distances between the planets, and they show how the cosmic energy is actively at work in your own life. The cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. The cardinal signs live in the present. The fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Your mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. If you were building a house, the architect would be the cardinal signs. That would be the idea people that lay out what's going on. Your bricklayers and Capricorns would be, your bricklayers and your construction people would be, I don't know why I said Capricorns there, I meant to say workers, are your fixed signs. The mutable signs would be the people working in the house or living in the building. We all have cardinal, fixed, and mutable qualities within. The more dominant category is really important in getting a feeling for the chart. If people want to do things boom right now, that's the cardinal. If it takes a while to get going, they want to look to see the history of what's been happening, there'll be a lot of fixed. There's a lot of dilly-dallying, a lot of scattered energy, multitasking. That can be an abundance of mutable. But it's good to have a balance of things. We have the mutable houses as well as the mutable signs. So your cardinal fire sign is Aries. Your fixed fire sign is Leo. Your mutable fire sign is Sagittarius. For next week, everybody, try to get a handle on those categories. If I say cardinal water, try to say Cancer. I won't put anyone on the spot, maybe, but then I might, depending how mean I feel. But, if I happen to say mutable water, you'll know I'm talking about Pisces. Try to get those categories in your thoughts, because in order to go further, which we are going to do, space is really, really vast, and the possibilities in the horoscope are really vast. If you were looking at my Facebook today and yesterday, you might have seen the little note about how traveling at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second, it's 1 second to see light from the moon. It's 8 minutes traveling at 186,000 miles a second to get to the sun. The sun could have exploded 5 minutes ago and we wouldn't know yet. Then it gets really interesting, because to get out of the Milky Way galaxy, it's 30,000, between 20 and 30,000 years. To get to the observable end of the universe, as far as we can go, it's over 4 billion years. And it still goes on and on like that. And we're going to be looking at stars, comets, all kinds of things, unless you get sick of me and decide to drop out of the class. But we'll look at how there are many, many things to consider, and they all refine the chart. Well, most of the time when people are doing a reading or trying to have a reading, they don't feel the patience to listen to all of that. So look at the sun, moon, and rising sign, and you can really read the gist of the chart with just that. So I will next week be going over the 12 ascendants or rising signs and how to do a chart. Oh, thank you, Joanne. I appreciate the positive thought there at the bottom. She said, so good. There, thanks. That's nice. Well, I thank all of you for coming. I really love all of you and love astrology. But if you want to do a really good, easy, quick reading on a chart, impress people and help them, just learn the 12 sun signs, the 12 moon signs, and the rising signs, and then which house the sun is in. If you just say that, you can do a lot to help the person in a quick, because everyone has a short attention span. I am lucky if I can hold someone's attention for an hour during a reading, and you can go on and on and on with the chart. And I don't know if it's that helpful, at least right away. It might be for those that are really interested in the theory, but most people want to learn what's going on in the 4 angular houses: the rising sign, the self; the 4th house, home and family; 7th house, partnership; 10th house, worldly success. Those are the 4 major areas. So anyway, just kind of think of that, everyone.